What's up, everybody? It is KT Vindicare, and you knew this one was coming. If you've seen my last video about the 10 best Star Wars characters in the Disney era, you knew that there was going to be a 10 worst Star Wars characters in the Disney era, and that's what this rant is all about. I'm going to talk a little bit about each character, just like my last video. So, without further ado, let's get into this for 1 second. Alright, so number one is DJ. Now, in case you don't remember who this is, DJ is the character that is played by Benicio del Toro in The Last Jedi. And I had to actually look up what this character's name was because he is so forgettable and unmemorable that I had to actually do that in order for me to remember what this guy's name is. Now, he plays almost exactly the same sort of role that Lando Calrissian plays in The Empire Strikes Back. However, Lando Calrissian is actually believable as like this charming like friend figure of Han Solo. There's a little bit of backstory that goes into like there's just a little like mention of how Han Solo, Chewbacca, and Lando Calrissian are familiar in the first place. But everything about DJ is so number one, it's predictable. At no point when you're watching, at least when I was watching it, did I not think that DJ was going to betray Rose and his party. Or her party. I at no point did I not see this coming. Number two, it's never explained how like DJ even knew who the First Order were in the first place, or how he like expected these people to just be valuable hostages for him. It's just kind of hand woven that like, oh yeah, like this guy is like a bad guy. He's supposed to be the supreme hacker that Maz Kanata recommends, and we'll get to her in a second. Uh, and nothing about him is explained. Like he's such a rushed, poorly developed, just poorly used character that at the same time serves an exact same purpose as Lando Calrissian did in the prequel trilogy or in the original trilogy. You are like he's just a perfect example of how the sequel trilogy as a whole operates, and he's just awful. Number nine, Maz Kanata. Okay, so we just mentioned DJ about how Maz Kanata just happened to know a supreme hacker that could get into Snoke's capital ship. Well, Maz Kanata is a bad character for a lot of reasons. She serves as a convenient plot device for two different movies at this point. So she is the one that's responsible for finding and giving Rey Luke and Anakin Skywalker's old lightsaber. Even though this plot point is completely not explained and makes no sense if you use any sort of logic in terms of how this happened. Now, there's a little bit in the like a side book somewhere about how she wanted to go find Luke Skywalker's lightsaber for some reason. However, like Bespin's a gas giant, and like his lightsaber falls out of the same like it falls from the same height that he does, and then he barely manages to survive by catching this little like antenna at the bottom of Bespin, at the bottom of the Cloud City, and below him is like a gas giant. So you'd think if you followed any kind of rationality that the lightsaber would be at the core of this gas giant. She without her, Rey never has a lightsaber, and without her, the whole subplot with Canto Bight never happens. And she is just so poorly explained and developed. Like they never even like give her any sort of exposition to how she knows Han Solo and Chewbacca in the first place. Um, she's just she's such a complot convenience. That's all she is, and it's so obvious and so poorly developed that she could not be on this list. Number eight, General Hux. Now, if we were just talking about The Force Awakens, General Hux wouldn't be on this list. Because General Hux serves basically the same purpose that any of the old admirals and, Imperial officers did in the original trilogy. He's so bland and just there. Like he's such an archetype for this series. But then in The Last Jedi, he gets used as like this butt of everyone's jokes character where he, he just becomes that much more of a joke. Like literally, like they turn this character into a joke of himself. He's poorly acted. You could have put any actor in that role as long as they were white and clean shaven. They could be General Hux. He has no like he has no personality except for the fact that he has to scream in every scene that he's in. He's just a bland, boring character that they then turn into the butt of the joke of the entire movie, and it's distracting. Number seven, the Inquisitors. So when I first did this list, I had the Inquisitors kind of separated into their own separate characters, but then I realized I had to add a couple of other characters higher up in this list. So the Inquisitors get bunched into a single character here at the number 7 slot. Now, if you guys have seen my previous video, you know that I am a big fan of Rebels. However, the Inquisitors are a big problem that I do have with that show. And I understand the role that the Inquisitors are supposed to serve. They're supposed to be like the placeholder boss that the heroes have to go through before they're able to take on like the bigger bosses like Darth Maul, Darth Vader, and Admiral Thrawn. But they get very little build up, development, and exposition into how or why Darth Vader has them in the picture in the first place. And then they've got like I hate their helicopter blade like lightsabers that somehow allow them to fly. They're just bad, poorly developed characters, and easily the weakest part of Rebels. And so that is what puts them on this list. Number six, Finn. Okay, so we're finally getting into some of the big characters now. So Finn, if it were just talking about the Force Awakens, again, just like General Hux, Finn probably wouldn't be on this list. He gets his own like redemption story arc within that movie, but then by the time we get to the Last Jedi, and by the time we're done with the Last Jedi, I literally am so done with everything that has to do with Finn. Like I really feel like his character, like the only reason why this character exists is because he needs to serve as a damsel in distress for some woman character in the series to come rescue him. Because that's all he ever does. He doesn't do anything meaningful throughout the entire movie aside from rescue Poe Dameron or help to rescue Poe Dameron, because Poe Dameron kind of rescues himself in The Force Awakens. He literally doesn't serve a purpose outside of that, except to complain, to be the damsel in distress, and to just be like, oh my god, like everything's bad, everything's horrible. Even his one-on-one with Captain Phasma it's so poorly done. Finn is such a bad character, and the fact that he's supposed to be like like this relatable character is just it's so badly done. Number five, Captain Phasma. So I think everyone kind of knew that Captain Phasma was going to be somewhere on this list. Let me ask you guys a question. What is the point of Captain Phasma? I mean, honestly, like other than the fact that she's got this cool looking chrome armor that I'm assuming is just there to sell action figures, what is the point of Captain Phasma? You literally could put any stormtrooper in at her role and nothing in the movie changes. Literally nothing. In fact, it's actually better because then you don't have to explain how Captain Phasma, who was locked in a trash compactor, ever survived the destruction of Starkiller Base in the first place. Like, you literally could put any stormtrooper in Captain Phasma's place and nothing about the story changes. She's such a pointless character. I've heard a lot of things on the internet about how she's just basically the new Boba Fett, except Boba Fett gets like some kind of exposition to who he is. Like he is a bounty hunter that works for Jabba the Hutt. That's enough. Honestly, that's enough. Like you already know the criminal underworld of Star Wars exists. You have Jabba the Hutt alluded to in A New Hope, the very first movie. You have Greedo who is trying to capture Han Solo because he had a smuggling deal go bad. You had Han Solo himself. You know this criminal underworld of the galaxy of Star Wars exists. So obvious, like it just makes perfect sense that in a galaxy where there's a big criminal underworld, of course there would be bounty hunters. It just makes sense. Captain Phasma, however, just doesn't make sense. Like they build her as this like supreme commander of the stormtroopers of the First Order, and yet she's a completely pointless character. I hate this character. I absolutely hate this character. She's the epitome of the lazy storytelling of the sequel trilogy, and she's just awful because of it. All right, number four, Vice Admiral Holdo. I'm going to be very brief with my description of Vice Admiral Holdo. Vice Admiral Holdo serves as a crutch for the film's social agenda that doesn't need to be there. Honestly, she doesn't. I'm gonna get into some more of this in a second, but honestly, that whole plot, that whole subplot of Poe Dameron and Vice Admiral Holdo in the movie, it does not need to be there. It serves as a completely pointless, like, at the end of the day when the plot is actually concluded, this plot line was completely pointless in the first place. But not only that, it just serves to weaken the movie. Like, honestly, if you take that plot line out of the movie's just better because of it. It's a complete distraction. She herself has no exposition, no backstory, no introduction. We don't care about her at all until this whole thing starts, and she's just a bad character. Bad, unnecessary character that only serves to weaken the movie. Number 3, Rey. Man, oh man, Rey. This is the protagonist of the sequel trilogy, and this character is probably the most boring character I think I have ever seen in any movie. I can't understand why they keep pushing this character as, like, oh, you're supposed to care and be relatable, like she's supposed to be the new Luke Skywalker. This character is not the new Luke Skywalker. There is nothing about this character that is compelling. Luke Skywalker was the epitome of the hero story because Luke Skywalker was a guy from nowhere that learned over the course of his story how to do everything. And he suffered loss, he suffered trials and tribulations. Rey just has everything handed to her, and it makes her so not compelling. And the fact that she is supposed to be the main character of the story, the hero of this story. She's supposed to somehow replace Han Solo, Leia Organa, and Luke Skywalker. It's insulting how bad this character is. And then Rian Johnson, like, okay, you know what? J.J. Abrams, like, he sets Rey up in Force Awakens, and there's already all these questions about, well, how come this is so easy for her? And then, he kind of left the door open for Rian Johnson to, like, explain something about Rey in the Force in the Last Jedi. But then Rian Johnson's just like, no, we don't need to explain Rey. It's okay. It's okay if she's all this powerful. We don't need to explain her backstory. What do you mean you don't need to explain her backstory? She's the protagonist. How are you just going to say, oh yeah, she's able to do all this stuff, and we don't need to give her any justifiable reason why? Are you serious? She's your main character. How can you not explain anything else about her? It's complete nonsense. It's complete garbage. Rey is such a bad character. And the fact that she is the main character of this story of the sequel trilogy, she drags the entire trilogy down with her. She is a terrible character, and I hate to use this term, but it's so obvious that she is the perfect example of this term. She's a Mary Sue. And the fact that you're okay with that you do nothing to try and mitigate how much of a Mary Sue she is so unforgivable. And it's just such a classic example of the arrogance and the stubbornness of the makers of the sequel trilogy that it's just unforgivable at a very core level. Number 2, Rose Tico. Let me ask you guys this. Is there anybody out there on YouTube that actually likes Rose Tico? Seriously. Leave me a comment and leave me a dislike if you actually like this character. Because honestly, this character, she's worse than Admiral Holdo, Captain Phasma, and Rey, because honestly, she is so pointless, so annoying, so distracting. She serves nothing to the plot, and honestly, she's destructive to the plot. She's worse than Jar Jar Binks in so many ways. Like, you literally could take her out of the story, and honestly, the movie just gets better. Honestly, the movie just gets better. I'm going to give a quick shout out to Dishonored Wolf, because in his video review, he points out, and I agree with this very much, that Finn had the opportunity to actually be to actually redeem himself in my eyes, and I think the eyes of many fans, by sacrificing himself in order to destroy the very poorly named and very poorly used battering ram laser. It's the equivalent to Starkiller Base in The Last Jedi. Um, he had the opportunity to sacrifice himself to destroy that weapon. And that would have completed his character arc in a very meaningful way. Now, granted, his character arc in the first place is very much the same as Han Solo's. He's supposed to be overcoming his own selfish desires in order to find a cause greater than himself. Like that character arc, by its very definition, is like completely unoriginal. But he had the opportunity to at least complete that character arc, and then Rose completely denies him that opportunity in order to have one of the worst love scene sequences that I have ever seen. And guys, dude, I watch anime. I have seen a lot of really terrible love scene sequences. This was the worst by far that I have ever seen. They she is just destructive to the plot. She doesn't need to be there. If you took her and Admiral Holdo out of Last Jedi and sent Poe Dameron with Finn to Canto Bight, you shave about 45 minutes off of the movie, and the movie is just more concise and better written as a result. You still have all the other problems with Rey and Luke Skywalker and everything else like that, but the movie is shorter and better if you take these two characters out of the movie. Rose Tico, I don't know what they were thinking with this character. All right, so before I get into my number one, I do have a dishonorable mention that belongs on this list. Who would belong on this list, except this character actually has a little bit of development attached to him. That character is Kylo Ren. Now, I can't stand Kylo Ren personally. I don't like this character. I hate how they try and use him as such a. I hate the dynamic with him and Luke Skywalker. Like, he represents so much of the bashing of the lore that The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens accomplish. However, at least his character is written in a way where he could almost be compelling. So because of that reason, he's not on this list, but he is absolutely a dishonorable mention. So with that said, let's get into number one. Number one, Supreme Leader Snoke. The walking plot hole. Now, if you've seen my previous video, you know that I've spent a full video, a full rant, ranting about just this character. But if you don't want to watch that video, let me give you a quick summary. So if you look at the entire story of the sequel trilogy as a whole, everything about the way that the all the events, the timeline or whatever that goes on in this story that they're trying to tell, all of it involves Snoke. Literally every single point. Like, I was even reading something on Wikipedia that the reason why Luke Skywalker even went to go, rebuild the Jedi school was because Snoke manipulated him to do that. There's no reason why that even needs to be there. Like, that's just a logical thing for Luke Skywalker to go do following Return of the Jedi. Snoke is the anchor of every single plot point. Why is Kylo Ren evil? Because of Snoke. Why is the First Order a thing? Because of Snoke. Why is Starkiller Base a thing? Because of Snoke. Everything in this story involves Snoke in some way, and yet Snoke himself is a completely wasted, unexplained character who gets killed off unceremoniously in the middle of The Last Jedi after demonstrating that he's super fucking powerful. Dude, this is the worst character I have ever seen utilized. And the fact that he is so important to the story is what puts him at number one on this list. This sequel trilogy will continue to go nowhere if Snoke remains unexplained. And you know what? At this point, I don't even care if they write in a believable backstory for him somehow in books or comics, or if they include him in that new cartoon series that they're making. At this point, he will forever be, if you're just looking at the movies, the ultimate plot hole and plot convenience for the entire franchise. And honestly, he just represents everything bad about the sequel trilogy. And for that reason, he is the worst character that Disney has ever introduced in Star Wars. And he will forever be. I can't see a way where J.J. Abrams or anybody else could possibly introduce a character worse than him. He's a missed opportunity. He is a Deus Ex Machina for everything that goes on in the story, and he's a terrible character. So that's my list. That's my rant. I know that people don't agree with all of these, especially some of the obvious ones like Ray and Finn, who people actually like. But I think a lot of these characters are pretty unanimously hated, and even that fact by itself just represents just how poor the writing in the sequel trilogy is. Many of these characters are on the level of Jar Jar Binks in terms of being distracting and destructive to the plot. And I can't believe that there's so many. I can't believe that there's so many out there. Like I could go on. I could complain about even more characters in the sequel trilogy, but these are the ones that stick out the most to me. And so, with that, I will conclude my rant. I will see you guys next time.